Hello and welcome to Ahval Podcasts, the home of objective, up-to-date and independent reporting on Turkey. Don't forget to follow our reports through social media, on ahvalnews.com or through our mobile app. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Ahval Podcast program. Today we have a senior lecturer at the American University conflict resolution program, Doğa, Ulaş, Eralp. We are going to talk about Sunday's elections and what it tells us. Welcome to the program, Doğa.
Thanks for having me, Ilhan. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. That's our pleasure. What did you see after Sunday? What happened in Turkey?
Well, I mean, obviously, the results of the repeat local elections in Istanbul means a lot. First of all, it's a huge city, right? It's a 15 million city, the size of which is actually quite larger than many European countries. So the mayor-elect, ex and new mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, will have basically, he will be governing a huge city budget that obviously would make him a quite visible new opposition political leader. So the important part of it, aside from the impact, rather the size of this electoral victory, is what it signifies. So İmamoğlu's victory basically points to a watershed moment in Turkish politics, which actually is not that different from what had been going on over the course of 2 centuries during Turkey's westernization and modernization period, where you have 2 rival processes, one of which is seeking centralization and control of all provinces versus local democracy movements. Really, this was the rivalry between these 2 processes that put an end to the Ottoman Empire. Obviously, it's an unfortunate kind of resemblance, but in 1987, at the time when Kenan Evren was the president and Turgut Özal was the prime minister, Turkey did sign a document under its Council of Europe membership that actually made Ankara, right, promise a certain set of reforms that would allow for localization of bureaucracy and economic, let's say, planning and democratization at the local level. So it's been now 32 years since the signing of that document, and Ankara obviously was quite hesitant in pulling and pushing for these reforms, with the fear that it may lead to irredentist tendencies in Turkey's southeast Kurdish cities. But what had emerged over the course of, let's say, 4 years since the 2015 elections, when the currently imprisoned Kurdish leader Selahattin Demirtas, during his presidential campaign at the time, during one of his speeches in the western city of Izmir, he actually asked the folks living in Izmir whether they wouldn't have really preferred to be governed in Izmir, not necessarily via Ankara, and received quite a warm welcome. And then subsequently, as many of our followers do know, he's been imprisoned, the peace process ended. But what these election results show, the way of pushing for democratization in Turkey at this moment, when Erdogan regime has so much consolidated its grip in the centralized powers, lies at the local level. So the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, more than 2/3 of Turkey's big metropolitan cities are now controlled by the largest opposition party means that the democratic opposition, not only center of left, socialists, pro-Kurdish or liberals, whatever I'm speaking in terms of the democratic opposition in capital letters, this may be really the way forward to push for more accountability and more exposure for the democratic opposition, bringing voice to the citizens at local assemblies. So during his, I don't know how long he was the mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, before, the new elections were called, 17 days, right? We already did see that when he actually allowed for the live broadcast from the Istanbul City Hall.
Yes.
And remember, millions of people were watching it. So that's
sure. But Ulaş, I mean, there is still Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey, and surely he's not going to just watch this trend taken off, and then he is going to let his throne seized by quote unquote enemies. What Erdogan is going to do against this movement?
So yeah, the $5 million question: what is in Reis's mind, or what does the chief think? So chief thinks quite straightforward and quite simplistically. Really, to be honest, he's gonna hit back. That's what he does. So he's gonna repeat what he did over the course of the last 7, 8, 9 years of his political careers: criminalize, prosecute, and imprison whoever is behind this kind of recent quote-unquote upheaval against his autocratic control of Turkey. So we already see the head of the main opposition party, People's Republican Party's Istanbul chief, Ms. Kaftancıoğlu, is going to have to show up at the criminal court in a couple days on accounts of basically on charges of using social media to insult Erdogan and the presidency, and basically other crimes as well, which have most probably again been recited by the judiciary, who's obviously under Erdogan's control, and on charges of 17 years of imprisonment. So that already tells us a lot. And obviously, those around Erdogan already kicked off a set of new policies or new laws that would take over the control of fiscal policies on where city governments could invest. So we already see that in Ankara, there's this network of cheap shops that, average folks could actually get bread at a much cheaper price. Now that's relinquished from the control of the mayor of Ankara. Same would also be implemented in Istanbul and other big cities. So it would show as the CHP-controlled cities as incompetent. And through this, Erdogan, for some reason, I don't know, we are not in the 90s anymore, we are not in the 2000s either, thinks that he could manipulate those folks who are unemployed, laid off, trying to bring, food to their table for $600 a month if they're lucky, that, it's the cause of our misery is just the CHP local governance. Obviously, this is not going to fly, but for some reason, he's persuaded by his own successful political careers that it will work. So what we could expect Erdogan to do, obviously, is to hit back and criminalize. And we'll see how the court's going to rule, but most probably Canan Kaftancıoğlu may actually be forced to quit her post, and that would be quite unfortunate. But I'm not sure this time the opposition would take these things as lightly as they used to.
Or how they're going to take, because we have this new, very new kind of politician called Ekrem İmamoğlu. He has done things very differently, and he beat back whatever the accusations the administration threw at him. So I think we have a very different kind of animal in the Turkish politics that knows how to turn things around, even against Erdogan. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch the dynamics you just laid out and how this new politician is going to react. My final question is going to be about this Trump and Erdogan meeting. Actually, it all links to, together, actually. We're talking about the Istanbul mayorship, but at the same time, that election, according to most of the credible analysts and economists, in result of the economic desperation the country is going through. At the same time, Turkey is going ahead with this S-400 deal, and U.S. sanctions are looming ahead. What is your expectation going forward in this summer? How we are going to, what kind of a Turkey we are going to have at least relations with the U.S. By, let's say, September or October, you think?
Well, I'm sure you heard now there's this heat wave, global heat wave going across the Atlantic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're going to also have our own share of climate change in Turkey-US relations, it's going to be a really, really hot summer, I'll tell you that much. So one thing that's for sure to kind of expect in the future, in the near future, is that the Turkey-US relations will be downgraded. It's not only really freezing the sale of F-35s, but it's rather more of a downgrade of the Turkish-American alliance. And it makes sense, really, if you put yourself in the boots of the NATO leadership. It really doesn't make sense for a NATO member to purchase a Russian missile defense system, which the NATO actually perceives as a formidable opponent, right? It just doesn't make sense. So, and the rather insistent and persistent rhetoric from Ankara suggests that Turkey doesn't really care much about sustaining its future in NATO. So for that matter, and obviously their miscalculation is that now they have this rather unconventional president at the White House who really doesn't care what Pentagon says. So they're just going to cut a deal with Trump and they're going to make it work, right? Somehow. It doesn't work that way. You know much better than I do, right? In the corridors of DOS or DOD, no one really takes lightly Turkey's decision. And especially the bureaucrats in Pentagon, also the military-industrial complex in the United States are not happy with it. They're not even happy with the European Union's own strategic autonomy, that when Europe announces they're going to start investing on their own industries. It makes sense because actually when you look into it, American military industry is selling around almost 20% of their sales to Europe and other NATO allies. So nobody would like any of their market share be captured by another opponent. There's the economic aspect of that, and obviously there's a strategic aspect of it, that a pro-Russian Turkey or pro-Eurasian Turkey would definitely be forced away from the democratic values or liberal democratic values it had promised to uphold. So again, kind of circling back to our earlier conversation about what these mayoral rerun elections suggest, that there is a majority in Turkey that is not happy about how the things go. So it's not only about who runs the cities, but it's also about how the foreign policy decision-making is being made. So İmamoğlu's re-election as the mayor suggests not only his own political prowess, but also the large discontent in the Turkish public about how the country is run, both domestically and in its external relations. So we're going to have to wait and see if Erdogan regime prefers to push through with this S-400 and God knows what else next, maybe Su-57s, right? That may replace F-35s. How the Turkish public opinion would react to such a drastic decision. It's not going to be as smooth as once hoped by the circles around Erdogan. So let's leave it at that, but it's definitely going to be a hot summer.
I know there are so many other questions to ask now, but let's stay in touch going forward this summer to monitor how some of these issues you very well articulated here going to end up, and especially on the S-400 issue that everybody is waiting and watching. Thanks so much for coming on today, Ulaş. Much appreciated, and talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.